IPEM Law Academy welcome you all on today's National Webinar Series 1 on the topic Environmental Conservation for a Balanced Ecosystem. IPEM Law Academy is a NAC accredited and affiliated to Chaudhry Charan Singh University, Meerut. It is approved by Bar Council of India and offers LLB 3 years and BLLB 5-year programs. IPEM Law Academy is conducting international conferences on yearly basis. The theme of International E-Conference 2021 was Intellectual Property Rights, the Contemporary Issues. Since the environmental crisis has been brought about the recklessness of mankind, it is also their duty to solve the problem. We cannot just leave it to God. Nature has the capacity to repair the damage if it is done within the sustainable limits. But the damage done during the last 100 years seems to be beyond the automatic capacity of the nature to heal. And that is why it is a crisis. But there is still a scope for damage correction, which requires man's intervention. Keeping this in mind, I, on behalf of IPEM Law Academy, would like to introduce the theme of the year of our International Conference 2022, which is none other than environment. This conference will give a platform to researchers belonging from different parts of the earth to come together and discuss the problem. We will be conducting a series of webinars covering all the major aspects of environment, and that's how step by step we'll move towards our international webinar, which is planned in October. Today, we have gathered here to sensitize the gathering and keep the importance of a balanced ecosystem at the forefront of people's mind. We have chosen this theme as the theme of the year with the purpose of raising awareness of the importance of sustainable living in environmental protection and reducing the personal and societal environmental effect through positive life changes. To begin with today's session, I would like to welcome our esteemed guest of the day. We have with us renowned environmentalist Mr. Rakesh Khatri, who is also known as the Nest Man of India, and Professor Dr. Bharti, Professor of Law at National Law University, Delhi. Welcome, sir. Welcome, ma'am. Before we move ahead, I request all the dignitaries to come up for the stage for the lighting of the lamp. Thank you. Before we begin with the enlightening and communicative session, I would like to invite Dr. R.K. Singhal, Director IPEM, to share the words of wisdom. Over to you, sir.
Reimagine, recreate, restore. This three words theme was given on the World Environment Day, which we celebrate every year on June 5th. Once again, good morning to all. I welcome on behalf of IPM family, Mr. Rakesh Khatri and Professor Dr. Bharti. The law department at IPM made an attempt to create more awareness in the society, specifically among the youth, how to create a balanced ecosystem. Let me remind through this webinar, everyone, that for a long time, we have been exploiting and destroying our planet's ecosystem. For an example, in every 3 seconds, the world loses enough forests to cover many activities that we plan and need. Not only that, you might have seen, you might have heard, forest catches fire across globe, and that has happened, you know why? Just because of unbalancing in our ecosystem. And over the last century, our wetland and coral reefs are continuously depleting, and it is estimated up to 90% of the coral reef could be lost by 2050, even if global warming is limited to an increase of 1.5 degree. Hence, ecosystem loss is depriving the world from many things like forest, trees, etc., and creating challenges to protect living and non-living environment. I think the emergence of COVID-19 that we already faced in last 1.5 years has shown just how dangerous the consequences could be of ecosystem loss. Maybe by shrinking the area of natural habitat for animals, we have created ideal conditions for pathogens, including coronavirus, to spread. According to me, only with healthy ecosystem we can enhance people livelihood. With this ecosystem restoring, we can achieve, with the help of its theme, reimagine, recreate, restore. I hope today's webinar is going to help all of us understand our roles and responsibilities in creating a balanced ecosystem. Thank you all the very best for this webinar. Thank you. Over to ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Meenakshi Tomar, Principal, IPEM Law Academy, to give the opening remarks and welcome our honorable guests. Over to you, ma'am.
A very good morning to one and all present here. It's given me an immense pleasure to start this auspicious event by heartily welcoming all the attendees. I, Dr. Meenakshi, Principal of IPEM Law Academy, take the privilege to warmly welcome to our delegates in the webinar on environmental conservation for a balanced ecosystem. In today's webinar, I sure that we all are going to get enlightened by the impactful voice of our respectable eminent speakers. So it is a moment of extreme pleasure to welcome Mr. Rakesh Khatri, also known as the next man of India, environmentalist, Limca Bukawadi, and founder of Ecoroots Foundation. I'm also privileged to welcome Professor Dr. Bharti from National Law University, Delhi. I once again, on behalf of entire fraternity of IPEM Law Academy, extend the heartiest welcome to all the dignitaries for sparing their valuable time out of the busy schedule for the gracing the occasion with their presence. I offer my regard each attendee for being part of the event. Wish all the very best to all for the successful event ahead. Thank you and welcome once again all. Over to you, Anchita.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, the wait is over. I would like to invite renowned environmentalist Mr. Rakesh Khatri, who is also known as the Nest Man of India, a documentary filmmaker by profession, but environmentalist by passion. Mr. Khatri committed himself first to the works on films on environmental topics. He then realized that he would be able to contribute to environmental protection and enrichment much more in the form of an organization. Therefore, in 2012, he founded NGO Ecoroots Foundation. Since the commencement, the NGO has been working tirelessly to conserve the ecosystem, environment, and biodiversity. He has conceived and successfully implemented over 20 projects on sparrow conservation, water conservation, and e-waste management. For his immense involvement in the environment, Mr. Khatri has been recognized with various awards like Limca Book of Records, International Green Apple Award, Earth's Day Star, National Award for Outstanding Efforts in Science and Technology, and last but not the least, London World Book of Records. I again welcome you, sir, to IPEM Law Academy. The gathering is all yours. Over to you, sir.
Can I start?
Yes, sir. Yes. The gathering is all yours.
अंशिता शुरू कर सकते हैं, ऑडियो क्लियर है आपके पास?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible.
जी जी। नमस्कार। मैं कोई बहुत बड़ा ज्ञाता नहीं हूँ, पर मैंने अपनी लाइफ के अंदर जितना ट्रेवल किया है एनवायरनमेंट को लेके, बेसिकली मैं वही बातें आपसे साझा करना चाहता हूँ। और आप उसको इस तरीके से लीजिएगा कि जैसे मैंने बहुत छोटी उम्र से इस काम को शुरू किया, तो मैं आपसे ये नहीं कह रहा कि आप एनवायरनमेंट में ही कूदिए और उसी काम में करिए, लेकिन हाँ, मैं कुछ बातें आपको आज बताऊंगा। मैं चाहता था अंशिता आप उनको एक वो छोटी सी फिल्म दिखा दें पहले, अगर हो सके तो। हेलो
जी सर।
अंशिता, वो फिल्म दिखा सकते हैं उनको?
सर एक मिनट। जी सर, कंटिन्यू सर। Sir, you're not audible. Your mic is off. Yes, sir.
वो फिल्म एक बार शो कर दीजिए बस उनको।
Yes, sir. Yes. Just a moment.
चलिए कोई बात नहीं, हम उसको बाद में प्ले कर लेंगे। शुरू करते हैं हम लोग। मैं आपको बहुत छोटी सी एक कहानी सुनाता हूँ कि जब मैं बहुत छोटा था, 7 साल का था, तो बहुत शैतान हुआ करता था, और स्कूल से आने के बाद मैं सीधा अपनी छत के ऊपर भागता था, जहाँ आप लोगों की लैंग्वेज में मैंने क्राइम के बहुत सारे इक्विपमेंट छुपा के रखे हुए थे। और वो इक्विपमेंट क्या थे? एक टोकरी थी, एक रस्सी थी, कुछ कलर थे और कुछ दाने थे। तो हमारा जो घर था वो पुरानी दिल्ली में हुआ करता था, चांदनी चौक के अंदर 3 मंजिली मकान था। तो ऊपर की छत के ऊपर जो दीवार साथ वाले घर से मिलती थी, उसमें हमने कुछ ईंटें, मेरे जो ग्रैंडफादर थे उन्होंने कुछ निकाल दी थी ईंटें उसमें, तो चिड़िया उसमें अपने घर बनाया करती थी। और घोंसले बहुत साफ थे, क्योंकि नीचे टीन की एक सेट थी, उसके नीचे बहुत सारे घोंसले होते थे, और गौरैया तब इफरात में मिलती थी, बहुत ज्यादा होती थी। उसका कारण एक तो ये होता था कि पहले जब गेहूं आती थी उसको सुखाया जाता था, और पापड़, बड़ियाँ, इस तरीके की सारी चीजें घर में ही बनती थी, तो वो उनकी फूड चेन का एक हिस्सा था। तो वो चिड़िया छतों के ऊपर खूब आया करती थी, उनके लिए पानी भी रखा जाता था, सब रखा जाता था। मैं क्या करता था, वो टोकरी लगा के और वो टोकरी के नीचे दाने डाल के रस्सी बांध के डंडी के साथ और दूर बैठ जाता था। जैसी ही चिड़िया उसमें आती थी और वो फटाक से उसकी डंडी को खींच दिया करता था। ये शरारत बहुत लोगों ने करी अपनी जिंदगी के अंदर, पर कुछ लोगों को ये शरारत जो थी वो फल गई, जैसे मुझे फली, और मुझे बहुत ब्लेसिंग मिली। हालांकि मैं नेचर के संग खिलवाड़ करता था, लेकिन वो खिलवाड़ तब तक ही रहा। उसके बाद तो फिर जब काम करना शुरू करा, तो आज तक उस चिड़िया को बचा ही रहा हूँ, और पूरे विश्व भर में घूम के बचाया मैंने उस चिड़िया को, जहां जहां मैं बचा सकता था। तो जब मैं उसको, चिड़िया को बंद कर लिया करता था और उसको निकाल खूब सारा रंग लगा के मैं उसको उड़ा दिया करता था, फिर ये देखता था कि कितनी देर में वापस आएगी। वो बेचारी आती थी, क्योंकि उसका घोंसला होता था, और मुझे कई बार जब मैं ऊपर से नीचे आता था, तो मेरे माता पिता मुझे पकड़ के कान से झुलाते थे कि आज तुमने फिर चिड़िया को रंग लगाया, आज तो तुम्हारी सजा ये है। ये शरारत खत्म नहीं हुई, ये चिड़िया का घोंसला और चिड़िया, उससे जो प्यार बचपन में शुरू हुआ था, वो आज 60 साल की उम्र तक भी मेरे साथ लगातार बना हुआ है। वहां से निकल के हम लोग फिर अशोक विहार चले गए, और तब तक तकरीबन फादर की डेथ हो चुकी थी, तो 80 का टाइम आ गया था, और 80 के टाइम के बाद ही ये ग्लोबल वार्मिंग, क्लाइमेट चेंज, ये बड़ी बड़ी बातें शुरू हो गई थी। लोग बातें बहुत करते थे एयर कंडीशन पे बैठ के, लेकिन मुझे लगता है हकीकी तौर पर और जमीनी तौर के ऊपर उसमें कुछ काम नहीं किया जाता था। तो मैंने देखा घोंसले बिल्कुल नहीं दिखते, क्योंकि कंक्रीट के जंगल बनने शुरू हो गए थे। उस समय मैं अशोक विहार गया था, और उसके आगे का पूरा एरिया जो बहुत दूर तक दिल्ली तक जाता है, बिल्डिंग्स बननी शुरू हो गई थी, पेड़ कटने शुरू हो गए थे, बाग के बाग उजड़ रहे थे पूरे। और लोगों ने एक नई रवायत अपने साथ ले ली थी कि अब वो अपने घरों में ऑर्नामेंटल ट्रीज लगाने लगे थे, पार्क के अंदर जो लोकल ट्रीज होते हैं जिन पे बर्ड अपने घर बनाते हैं, वो उन्होंने लगाने बंद कर दिए थे। तो ये एक सबसे बड़ा कारण था। दूसरा, हमने अपने घरों को बंद कर दिया, या यूं कहें हम लोगों ने अपने दिल को बंद कर दिया। तो वो चिड़िया जो हाउस स्पैरो हमारे घरों में रहती थी, अब उसको घर में आने का रास्ता ही नहीं मिलता था। आपको याद होगा अपने बचपन का, आप लोग जब चिड़िया उड़ खेला करते होंगे गर्मी के अंदर, या कभी आप पंखे की तरफ देखते हो तो पंखे की जो डंडी होती है उसके साथ एक टप लगा होता है, वो उसका सबसे फेवरेट स्थान होता था जहाँ वो अपना घोंसला बनाया करती थी। और मेरे पुराने घर में भी ये एक बहुत अच्छा वो होता था कि जैसे ही उस पंखे के कटोरे के अंदर वो अपना घर बनाती थी तो मेरे दादाजी घर में 144 लगा देते थे कि पंखा कोई नहीं चलाएगा, अगर किसी ने पंखा चलाया और चिड़िया कट गई तो उसके कान काट दिए जाएंगे। तो वो आज तक बात हमारे दिमाग में है, पंखा चलाते हुए अभी भी कई बार ये लगता है कि नहीं, वो पंखा नहीं चलाना, चिड़िया का घोंसला ना हो। तो वो करते करते जब वहां पहुंचे तो हमने देखा वहां कहीं घोंसले दिखते ही नहीं थे, बहुत छोटे छोटे घोंसले, कहीं कहीं वो रुई या धागों के अटके हुए पाइप के अंदर दिखाई दे जाते थे। तो हमें लगा अब घोंसले तो खत्म हो गए, क्या करा जाए। उसी दौरान में साउथ का हरा नारियल आ गया पीने के लिए, तो बड़े शौक से पीते थे। एक दिन हम लोग बनाया उन्होंने,
Sir, I guess there's some network issue on your side. Your voice is not clear and you're not audible right now. Hello, sir, you're on mute right now. Kindly unmute
अभी
yourself.
कैमरा ऑन है लेकिन मेरा।
Yes, sir, yes, your camera and your voice is also clear now.
तो हम लोगों ने वो नारियल के जो घोंसले थे वो 40 बनाए और अलग अलग पेड़ों के ऊपर हमने उनको लगा दिया। और लगाने के बाद हमें लगा कि ये तो बहुत बड़ा काम कर दिया हमने, हम तो साइंटिस्ट हो गए, मुझे लगता है अवार्ड मिलेगा इस बात पे कि हमने घोंसले बनाए और चिड़िया आ गई। और लोगों ने हंसना शुरू करा कि चिड़िया अपने घोंसले में हमेशा आती है, अपने आप खुद बनाती है, वो आपके घोंसले में क्या आएगी। 15 दिन तक हम लोग उसको वॉच करते रहे। 15वें दिन हम लोगों ने सोचा कि चलो देखते हैं इसमें क्या है। तो 1 से और 38 नंबर तक जो हमने नंबर लिखे थे, 38 नंबर तक बिल्कुल खाली था। 39वें नंबर के अंदर एक 2 बुलबुल के छोटे से बच्चे थे। तो एक आस तो बंधी कि हाँ कुछ हो सकता है। अच्छा, तब तक बड़े भी हो गए थे, काफी जिम्मेदारियां घर की बहुत आ गई थी क्योंकि अकेला कमाने वाला था। तो हमें लगा कि यार ये काम अब कब तक करते रहेंगे। उसी दौरान में वहां से फिर हम लोग मयूर विहार शिफ्ट हो गए। पढ़ाई कर ली थी, मैरिज भी हो गई थी, 2 छोटे बच्चे भी थे। तो हम लोगों ने जब शिफ्ट कर लिया मयूर विहार में तो सोचा अब क्या करा जाए। घोंसले तो छोड़ूंगा नहीं क्योंकि घोंसला बचपन से मेरे साथ जुड़ा हुआ था और मैं घोंसले को बहुत मुकद्दस भी मानता हूँ क्योंकि मुझे लगता है माँ की कोख के बाद अगर कोई सबसे पवित्र चीज है तो वो घोंसला है। इसमें से एक नया जीवन निकलता है, प्रकृति में मिलता है और प्रकृति को आगे बढ़ाता है। तो हमने सोचा करना तो है, कैसे करेंगे ये देखते हैं। तो हमने R&D करी, मैं, मेरी वाइफ और कुछ हमारे जो लाइक माइंडेड थे, हम लोगों ने मिलकर, और हम लोगों ने जूट की डंडियों से इस तरीके का एक खांचा बनाया। पहले हम लोगों ने सोचा ये खांचा हम बनाते हैं, हम इससे घोंसला बनाएंगे। और ये एक ही रस्सी से बांधा गया है पूरा। ये बेंत की पतली पतली डंडियां जिनको गीला करके राउंड शेप में बनाते हैं हम लोग और फिर ये लगाते हैं। तो इसके ऊपर फिर हम लोगों ने थोड़ा सा कपड़ा लगाया, कपड़े को बांधा, बांधने के बाद हमने उसके अंदर जूट लगाया और जूट के बाद इसकी सुतली बांध दी गई। तो ये घोंसले जो हमने लगाने शुरू करे तो पहला एक अनाज की जो मंडी थी वहां हम लोगों ने जाके लगाया, 1 लगा दिया, 20 बना के ले गए थे, 19 रख दिए। 1 से लेकर के 2 दिन तक, 3 दिन तक हम लोग वहां कैमरा लेके बैठे रहे लेकिन कोई चिड़िया नहीं आई उसके अंदर। और लोग हंसते थे, वाकई में हंसते थे लोग और कहते थे कि चिड़िया आपके घोंसले में क्यों आएगी। मेरा कैमरा चल रहा है अंकिता, या बीच में कोई ऑडियो आ रही है? और
नहीं सर, आपका कैमरा पूरा चल रहा है आराम से।
चल रहा है ना?
हाँ जी सर।
तो जब हमने घोंसला लगा दिया पहला तो 3 दिन तक जब वेट करते रहे, चौथे दिन संडे का दिन था, तो जब मैं घर से कैमरा लेके निकल रहा था तो मेरी वाइफ ने मुझसे पूछा कि जा रहे हो? मैंने कहा हाँ। क्या होगा? उससे पहले एक बहुत छोटा सा और लाइफ चेंज करने वाला और दिशा देने वाला एक इंसिडेंट होके चुका था। मैंने तब तक PM को ज्वाइन कर लिया था दिल्ली में। उनके घर पे बच्चों की एक एनवायरनमेंट की क्लास लेते थे हम लोग, जो स्कूल के बच्चे 50-50 की तादाद में आया करते थे ट्यूसडे और फ्राइडे को। तो मैं और मेरा बेटा मिलके लेते थे वो क्लास। तो वहां से मैं गड़ी मांडू, एक जंगल है जहाँ बैम्बू का एक पूरा जंगल लगाया जा रहा था, तो मुझे CM ने कहा कि आप वहां जाके घोंसले लगाओ। तो मैं वहां घोंसले लगाने चला गया। ये शायद 2008 की बात है और मेरी जिंदगी का सबसे अहम मोड़ था जिसने मुझे इस तरफ मोड़ा और आप लोगों के सामने आज बैठाया। वहाँ एक माली हुआ करते थे, रोज मुझे देखते थे कि मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ, मैं घोंसले लगा के जा रहा हूँ, और वो मुझे रोज रोकते थे और रोज मुझसे पूछते थे। एक दिन उन्होंने मुझे बैठा दिया, बोले बैठो यहाँ पे। बैठ गया। बोले इससे क्या होता है? मैंने कहा मैं घोंसले लगा के जाता हूँ। तो बोले ये सबसे कमाल का और सबसे बड़ा सवाब का काम है कि आप उनको घर दे रहे हो जिनका घर हम लोगों ने छीन लिया। तो इस काम को आप कंटिन्यू रखना, ये आपके लिए बरकतों के दरवाजे खोलेगा। और उन्होंने अपनी जेब में हाथ डाल के मुझे कुछ दिया। मैंने इज्जत की खातिर उस हाथ को ऐसे ही बंद कर लिया। और बहुत देर के बाद जब मैं उनके पास से बात करके उठा, बहुत आशीष दी उन्होंने, बहुत अच्छे तरीके से बात करी। और मन के पीछे मैं यही सोचता जा रहा था कि ये कोई खुदा का भेजा हुआ नुमाइंदा है जो शायद रास्ता दिखाने आया है। और वाकई वो खुदा का भेजा हुआ नुमाइंदा था जिसने मुझे वो रास्ता दिखाया कि इस रास्ते पे चलो और इसके ऊपर ये काम करो। तो मैं अब तक आज छोड़ चुका था, क्योंकि घोंसले लगाते थे या तो वो टूट जाते थे या सूख जाते थे। मैंने घर आके अपने घर वालों को भी बताया। उन्होंने 101 रुपए मुझे दिए थे, जो आज तक मेरे पास एक बहुत बड़ी धरोहर की तरह रखते हैं। मैंने अपने घर वालों को बताया तो उन्होंने कहा शायद वो सही कहेंगे। इसी दौरान ये हम लोग जब शिफ्ट होके आए थे तो हम लोगों ने घोंसला वहां लगाया मार्केट के अंदर, पहला घोंसला। तो 3 दिन बैठने के बाद चौथे दिन जब मैं घर से जा रहा था तो मैंने आपको बताया, तो मेरी वाइफ ने कहा, उन्होंने एक सेंटेंस बड़ा अच्छा बोला मुझसे कि तुम जाओ, क्योंकि उन्होंने तुम्हें बहुत अच्छी एक होप दी थी और एक बहुत अच्छा रास्ता दिखाया था। क्योंकि उन्होंने मुझसे ये कहा कि जिंदगी में रास्ता दिखाने वाले तो बहुत मिलते हैं, लेकिन उसके ऊपर चलना कैसे ये बताने वाले बहुत कम मिलते हैं। उन्होंने तुम्हें बताया और तुम जाओ। मैं गया। 11 बजे तक मैं फिर भी कैमरा लेके बैठा रहा। तो 11:15 और 11:30 बजे की बात है, एक मेल स्पैरो कहीं से उड़ता हुआ आया और उसके ऊपर बैठा। आप मेरी वेबसाइट पर जाके वो फोटो देख सकते हैं। वो पहली फोटो थी उस घोंसले के ऊपर चिड़िया के बैठने की। वो मेल स्पैरो ने उसका खूब सारा मुआयना किया और मुआयना करने के बाद वो उड़ गया। मैंने खड़े होकर ताली बजाई, वो फोटोग्राफ भी क्लिक करे। कुछ लोगों ने भी बहुत अच्छा फील किया। हमारे साथ जो 2 लोग और बैठे थे उन्होंने भी खुश होकर ताली बजाई। थोड़ी देर के बाद वो फीमेल के साथ आ गया। तो बड़ी एक कहानी जैसी लगती है, जैसे कहानी गढ़ी गई हो, लेकिन ये वाकया वाकई मेरी जिंदगी का बिल्कुल हकीकी वाकया है कि जब मैंने देखा कि उस चिड़िया के साथ आया, उनके मुंह में तिनके थे और उन्होंने उस घोंसले के अंदर वो तिनके रखने शुरू कर दिए। जब तिनके रखे और मैंने खड़े होकर ताली बजाई तो बहुत सारे लोगों ने मेरे साथ खड़े होकर ताली बजाई। उन्होंने कहा कि सफल हो गया। और 2 मिनट के अंदर जो 19 घोंसले रखे थे वो सारे के सारे उठा के ले गए, सबने अपने घरों पर लगा दिए। संडे का दिन था वो। उसके बाद वेडनेसडे या फ्राइडे थर्सडे को मैं वहां गया था, तो हर घोंसले के अंदर चिड़िया ने अपना घर बना रखा था। तो मुझे बताइए इससे बड़ी और ब्लेसिंग क्या हो सकती है। और उसके बाद जो निरंतर यात्रा शुरू हुई 2008 से, वो आज तक चलती चली आ रही है। लिम्का बुक में नाम आ गया, आपको इंटरनेशनल हाउस ऑफ कॉमन्स में बुला के सम्मानित कर दिया गया, ताइवान से आपको बेस्ट प्रैक्टिस के लिए अवार्ड मिल गया, मैक्सिको से मिल गया, नेशनल अवार्ड मिल गया। और तो और बच्चों की छोटी किताब आईसीएसई बोर्ड की 4th क्लास की, उसमें इंग्लिश बुक के अंदर एक चैप्टर आपके ऊपर आ गया, जो जीते जी शायद बहुत बड़ी एक अचीवमेंट होती है। और उसमें जुड़े कौन रहे? आप जैसे लोग जो बात को सुनते थे, समझते थे और फिर हम लोगों से घोंसले सीखते थे। और तभी मैंने उसी दौरान मैंने 2008 के बाद ये पक्का कर लिया था कि मैं बच्चों के संग सबसे ज्यादा काम करूंगा, क्योंकि मुझे लगता है उन बच्चों को जगाना सबसे ज्यादा जरूरी है। तो 2012 में मैंने अपना फिर एनजीओ बनाया। एक लाइन मैं आपको ये कहना चाहूंगा कि असफलता हमेशा मिलती है आदमी को, असफलता से घबराना नहीं चाहिए। मैंने अपनी जिंदगी का एक मूल मंत्र ये बनाया कि आपको अगर पहली बार असफलता मिलती है, उसके बाद अगर उस काम में सफल हो जाते हैं, तो मुझे लगता है आपको कोई नहीं रोक पाएगा, आप बहुत लंबे रास्ते पर जाएंगे। मेरा जीता जागता उदाहरण है, मैंने फादर की डेथ के बाद ना इतनी पढ़ाई करी, ना मैंने किसी और स्टडी के अंदर काम किया। मैंने पहली नौकरी 150 रुपए से शुरू करी थी। आज मैं जितना भी काम करता हूँ वो सब इन बच्चों के लिए जो मेरे साथ जुड़े हैं, या जो मेरे साथ और स्वयंसेवी संस्थाएं जुड़ी हुई हैं उनके लिए, या इस घोंसले के लिए। इसके अलावा बहुत सारे काम करते हैं हम। एनवायरमेंट इश्यूज के ऊपर थिएटर करते हैं, हम लोग किताबें निकालते हैं बच्चों के साथ, हम लोग टीचर्स को ट्रेन करते हैं, हम लोग बायोडाइवर्सिटी पे थिएटर करते हैं, हम लोग पानी बचाने को लेके बहुत काम करते हैं। और ये दोनों काम मैंने बहुत कमाल किए। जब क्लाइमेट चेंज पे थिएटर किया तो 1,12,000 बच्चों के साथ किया था। मेरे पास 600 रुपए का एक छोटा सा रिलायंस का फोन होता था। मैं आपको अपनी कोई गाथा इस तरीके से नहीं सुना रहा हूँ कि मैंने बड़े कष्ट के दिन काटे, मैंने बहुत अच्छे दिन काटे और हमेशा प्रकृति ने मेरा साथ दिया, लोगों ने साथ दिया, और मैं इसीलिए आगे बढ़ता चला गया। क्योंकि मुझे लगता है मेरी मंशा बहुत क्लियर थी कि मुझे एनवायरमेंट के लिए कुछ करना है, और मैं करता रहूंगा ताऊं जब तक मैं जिंदा हूँ। अब तक मैं 2.5 लाख से ज्यादा घोंसले बना चुका हूँ। 2019 के अंदर हमारी 1,25,000 जूट के घोंसले, ये जो मेरा घोंसला है, जो मेरा पहला घोंसला है जो मैंने सबसे पहले बनाया था, ऐसे हम लोग 1,25,000 का हमारा रिकॉर्ड 2019 में लंदन बुक ऑफ वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड के अंदर आया। उसके बाद जब तक हम 2.5 लाख घोंसले बना चुके हैं। ये घोंसला प्योर बिल्कुल जो बेट की डंडियां मैंने आपको दिखाई थी उससे बना है। इसका बड़ा अच्छा मैकेनिज्म है, ये इसका होल है, एक छोटा सा इसके और इसके बीच में 4 उंगलियों का कमरा होता है, ये इसका घर है, अंदर जाने का दरवाजा है उसका, और ये डंडी है। जब चिड़िया अंदर चली जाती है और उस घोंसले के अंदर अपने एग ले करती है, तब तक मेल उसकी केयर टेक करता है बाहर से दाना खिलाने की। जब बच्चे थोड़े से अंडे में से बाहर आ जाते हैं, शरारती होते हैं, जब वो उछल कूद करने लगते हैं तो फिर चिड़िया के लिए इतनी जगह नहीं होती, तो वो बाहर आ जाती है। उसके बाद वो बाहर रहती है और वो बाहर से इंसेक्ट्स को लेके आती है। जैसे हम लोग बचपन में ग्राइप वाटर और मुगली गुट्टी पिया करते थे, इसी तरीके से उन बच्चों के लिए वो ऐसे इंसेक्ट्स लाती है जो उनका इम्यून सिस्टम और डाइजेशन और उनकी हेल्थ को बरकरार रखते। वो यहाँ बैठ के आवाज लगाती है। ये फोटोग्राफ आप देख सकते हैं बच्चों को खाना खिलाते हुए। मेरी वेबसाइट पे फिल्में भी हैं और वो भी हैं, और नहीं तो यूट्यूब पे आप जाके देख सकते हैं। यहाँ बैठ के वो आवाज निकालती है और बच्चे यहाँ आ जाते हैं, यहाँ से इनको खाना खिलाते हैं। जब बच्चे थोड़े बड़े हो जाते हैं तो वो भी उड़ जाते हैं, ये घोंसला खाली रह जाता है। ये कुछ दिन के लिए खाली रहता है, जैसे मकान एक खाली होता है, दूसरा किराएदार आता है, इसमें कोई दूसरा ग्रुप आ जाता है तो वो अपना घर बना लेता है। ये घोंसला हम लोग जो बनाते हैं, इसके लिए हमने बहुत सारे लोगों को हायर कर रखा है अपने साथ, जिनकी जीविका चलती है इसके साथ। वो लोग बनाते हैं इसको और हम लोग फिर इनको लोगों को देते हैं। और इसकी वर्कशॉप होती है बाकायदा। वर्कशॉप के अंदर 3-3 जनरेशन बैठती हैं हमारे साथ, जैसे बच्चे बैठते हैं, उनके पेरेंट्स बैठते हैं और उनके ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स बैठते हैं। तो मुझे लगता है इससे अच्छा तो और कोई ऐसा हो नहीं सकता कि उसमें वो 3 लोग बैठे और वो एक घोंसला बनाए। जैसे लास्ट वर्कशॉप के अंदर 85 ईयर्स ओल्ड की एक गायनेकोलॉजिस्ट थी जो बैंगलोर से आई। उन्होंने ये घोंसला बनाया और उन्होंने कहा कि जब हिंदुस्तान आजाद हुआ था तो मैंने लाल किले पर भाषण सुना था, मैं बहुत रोई थी कि हमारा हिंदुस्तान आजाद हो गया, और खुशी भी बहुत थी। लेकिन आज मुझे ये घोंसला बना के जो खुशी मिल रही है, वो शायद पहले कभी नहीं मिली। हम एक किस्म का घोंसला और बनाते हैं जो हम रैक पिकर्स को अपने साथ इन्वॉल्व करते हैं, जो बेसिकली कबाड़ बीनते हैं। ये हमारे लिए वो टेट्रा पैक के डिब्बे इकट्ठे करते हैं। ये टेट्रा पैक से बनाया हुआ है। इस एक बर्ड हाउस के अंदर 500 डिब्बे लगते हैं टोटल टेट्रा पैक के, फ्रूटी और जो जूस के डिब्बे आते हैं वो हमारे कलेक्ट करते हैं, हमको कुछ पैसा देते हैं उसका। वो जब कलेक्ट करके आ जाता है फिर वो यहाँ से पालघर चला जाता है। ये टेट्रा पैक कंपनी सपोर्ट करती है इसको, और ये टेट्रा पैक के साथ मिलकर बनाते हैं। ये भी बहुत जल्दी ऑक्यूपाइड होता है। तो ये और वो जूट के घोंसले मिला के हम अब तक तकरीबन 2.5 लाख घोंसले बना चुके हैं। और एक बहुत अच्छी जो चेंज मैंने देखी अभी पिछले 2 साल के अंदर, पैंडेमिक के टाइम के अंदर हम लोग बहुत परेशान थे कि हम स्कूल के बच्चों तक पहुंच नहीं पा रहे, हम लोग अपना किट नहीं दे पाते, जो हमारी किट है इसकी बनाने की, तो कैसे करें। तो एक दिन मैंने और वाइफ ने, हम दोनों ने फैसला करा कि इसके लिए प्लास्टिक के कंटेनर से हम घर बनाते हैं इनका। और हमने प्लास्टिक के कंटेनर से घर बनाए, और वो प्लास्टिक के कंटेनर से हमने 75,000 घोंसले बना डाले पिछले 2 साल के अंदर पैंडेमिक के टाइम में, जो अभी भी जारी हैं, अभी भी निरंतर बना रहे हैं। और उसमें सबसे ज्यादा महाराष्ट्र, कर्नाटक और राजस्थान के बच्चों ने पार्टिसिपेट किया। खूब बनाए, अच्छे डेकोरेट करे और वो फोटो भेजते हैं। तो मैं आपसे वही कहना चाहता था कि अवार्ड तो जिंदगी में हर आदमी को मिलता है, लेकिन मेरे लिए सबसे बड़े अवार्ड जिसके लिए मेरा घर कम पड़ता है वो है जब लोग हमसे सीखते हैं, सीखने के बाद अपने घर में लगाते हैं, और घर में लगाने के बाद जब उसमें चिड़िया अपने अंडे देती है, बच्चे निकलते हैं और वो प्रकृति में जाके मिलते हैं, तो मुझे लगता है उससे बड़ा और कोई सर्टिफिकेट नहीं हो सकता। तो मेरी जिंदगी में तो यही ब्लेसिंग आई है इस चिड़िया से, और मुझे लगता है मैं निरंतर जब तक मेरे शरीर में ताकत है मैं ये काम करता रहूंगा। अब और बातें और चेंज होती चली जा रही हैं काफी, जैसे मेरी ऑटोबायोग्राफी भी इस साल आ रही है। स्विट्जरलैंड से एक नई किताब निकल रही है, फेबुलस 50। एक ऐसे मैं अपने आप को क्या कहूँ, व्यक्ति कहूँ, ऐसे व्यक्ति को जिसने बचपन के अंदर कभी पढ़ाई भी प्रॉपर ढंग से नहीं करी आज तक। मैं कोई टेक्निकल बातें नहीं करता, मुझे लगता है कहानी ही एक सबसे अच्छा माध्यम है, और नाटक जो हम करते हैं बच्चों के साथ, जो आदमी को जगा सकते हैं, और बच्चों को जगाना जरूरी है। तो वो किताब जो आ रही है फेबुलस 50, उसमें 50 लोगों को लिया उन्होंने पूरे वर्ल्ड ओवर से, जिनकी गाथाएं हैं कि उन्होंने ग्रासरूट लेवल से कैसे काम किया। अब तक करीबन 170 के करीब फिल्में मेरे ऊपर नेशनल ज्योग्राफी से लेकर डिस्कवरी तक सब लोग बना चुके हैं। तो एक आम बच्चा जो बहुत छोटा था और जो शरारती था और जिसने पढ़ाई भी प्रॉपर नहीं करी, शायद अभावों के कारण या कैसे भी कह लीजिए, लेकिन आज आपके सामने बैठ के बोल रहा है। तो मुझे लगता है कि मेरी स्टोरी से या मेरे कहने से, मैं जब टेड टॉक कर रहा था तब भी यही हुआ था, उन्होंने मुझे 18 मिनट दिए थे लेकिन 22 मिनट तक मैं बोला। और उसके बाद मुझे लगा कि हाँ, वाकई में अगर आप ठान लें मन के अंदर, एक बहुत मामूली सा घोंसला जिसकी हमारी हंसी सबसे ज्यादा उड़ती थी कि अच्छा इस उम्र में घोंसला बनाओगे आप, लेकिन वही घोंसला आज मुझे विश्व भर में कहाँ कहाँ ले गया मुझे नहीं मालूम। मेरा सबसे अच्छा एक्सपीरियंस कल हुआ, जब मैं कल पहली बार कैलाश सत्यार्थी जी से मिला और उन्होंने 45 मिनट बैठ के अपने हाथों से घोंसला बनाया। तो मुझे लगता है एक नोबेल प्राइज विनर और इतनी बड़ी शख्सियत अगर वो समझ सकती है और उन्होंने मुझसे कहा कि ये संसार एक घोंसला ही है जिसमें हम लोग रहते हैं, तो ये काम बहुत अच्छा है, इस काम को निरंतर जारी रखें और मैं इस काम में आपके साथ हूँ। तो अगर एक ऐसा व्यक्ति आपको इतना बड़ा आशीष दे तो मुझे लगता है जिंदगी में और कुछ नहीं चाहिए। आप में से बहुत से ऐसे लोग निकलेंगे। मेरे संग स्कूल में ये बड़ा अच्छा एक्सपीरियंस होता है, जब मैं वर्कशॉप करता हूँ तो मैं उनसे पूछता हूँ कितने बच्चे डॉक्टर बनेंगे, कितने बच्चे लॉयर बनेंगे, कितने बच्चे ये बनेंगे, वो सब हाथ उठाते हैं। और जहां मैं पूछता हूँ उनसे कि अच्छा मेरे जैसा कोई बनना चाहेगा, तो मुश्किल से 2 हाथ उठते थे आज से 5 साल पहले तक। लेकिन अब जब मैं वर्कशॉप में पूछता हूँ, जैसे मैंने हंसराज में या कहीं भी कॉलेज में वर्कशॉप करी, मैंने पूछा उनसे कितने बनेंगे, तो अब मैं बड़ा खुश होता हूँ कि कम से कम 20 से 25 हाथ उठते हैं कि नहीं हम इस फील्ड में जाना चाहते हैं। तो मुझे लगता है नेचर को बचाना हमारी जिम्मेदारी है। नेचर को हमारी कोई जरूरत नहीं, नेचर की हमें जरूरत है, तो उस नेचर को बचाना हमारे लिए बहुत जरूरी है। इसलिए मैं बच्चों को हमेशा बताता हूँ कि आप अपने मम्मी पापा के एटीएम कार्ड या अपने एटीएम कार्ड की तरह नेचर के रिसोर्सेज को यूज करिए। आप कभी बैंक से फालतू पैसा नहीं निकालते ना, तो फिर नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज को हम क्यों बर्बाद करते हैं। और यही कारण है कि बच्चे मेरे से जुड़ते हैं, अपने एक्सपीरियंस शेयर करते हैं और हम उनको किताबों में कंपाइल करते चले जा रहे हैं। मुझे लगता है एक बहुत बड़ा दस्तावेज बनेगा इसका। मैं आजकल पहाड़ के ऊपर भी एक काम कर रहा हूँ, जहाँ जाते हैं उनको मैंने कैमरे दिए।
It's not audible.
Am I audible? Sir, your
जी
voice was.
जी जी बताइए बताइए, मेरी आवाज आ रही है आपको? बताइए।
Yes, yes.
हाँ
Now
जी
you're
सर।
audible, sir. I guess there was some issue.
Yes, it's now audible.
आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है क्लियर मेरे पास। नहीं, मुझे आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है, या तो आप, मेरा तो कनेक्शन ठीक।
हेलो सर, अब आ रही है?
अंकिता आप दोहरा दीजिए कुछ।
हाँ जी सर, आ रही है आपको आवाज?
You're audible. Hello, am I audible? I guess there's some connectivity issue on sir's side. Should I play the video?
बिल्कुल आप बताइए, मेरा तो कनेक्शन क्लियर है शायद।
ठीक है सर, मैं
तो
वीडियो
रोज ही
प्ले कर रही
वेबिनार
हूँ।
करता हूँ।
हाँ जी, वीडियो स्टार्ट कर दो सर। ओके।
आपका वीडियो का ऑडियो नहीं है शायद इसमें।
हाँ जी सर, कनेक्ट कर रहे हैं। ऑडियो नहीं है।
हमारा नजदीकी मकान हुआ करता था, का मकान था, छत के ऊपर बहुत सारे घोंसले। सबसे कमाल की चीज ये होती थी कि वो पंखा के अंदर घर बनाया करती थी, जो अब खत्म हो गया। और मेरे दादाजी क्या करते थे कि जैसी चिड़िया पंखे में घर बनाती थी और धारा 144 लगा दिया करते थे, देखिए अगर किसी ने पंखा चलाया और चिड़िया कटे तो इसकी कान काट दिया।
But when Mr. Rakesh moved to the city, he realized that he no longer woke up to the beautiful birds, a result of deforestation and rapid urbanization.
चौक यार शिफ्ट हो गए तो वहाँ कंक्रीट का जंगल था, डेवलपमेंट शुरू हो गई। 1980s का टाइम, पार्क कटते चले जा रहे थे, बिल्डिंग्स कटती चली जा रही थी, चिड़िया का घोंसला कहीं नहीं दिखता था। और ये दिल में बड़ी बेचैनी लाती थी ये चीज कि चिड़िया के घोंसले हमने बचपन से देखे थे और अब चिड़िया का घोंसला दिखता नहीं।
Rakesh knew he had to address this issue, so he made a nest with long coconut husk and crumble newspaper placed in different places. Unfortunately, no birds adapted to these nests, and people started to make fun of Rakesh.
बहुत मजाक उड़ाया था। आपके घोषणा में क्लियर क्यों आई तो ये सवाल आज तक हमारे सामने आता है कि आप कैसे बने। उसके बाद जो प्रोजेक्ट हमने बनाया था पहली बार तो वो सक्सेस नहीं हुआ, हमने 40 घोंसले लगाए थे, तो उसके बाद चेक करा 15 दिन बाद सूख गए। उसके बाद R&D करके हम लोग वो बैम्बू स्टिक से अपने घोंसले बनाने शुरू करे, तो सब ज्यादा सक्सेस। और वो पहली बार जो बनाए थे तो एक कॉलोनी में लगाए थे जाके तो बड़ी फ्लेक्सिबल और कोई नहीं होती कि आप किसी ऐसे हमें नहीं को
आप लोग अपने माइक क्यों नहीं ऑफ कर रहे?
Find the story of Rakesh inspiring to carry message inspiring story in culture the better.
जी बताइए। कोई सवाल आप लोगों का अगर हो तो आपके मन में।
Participants, if you have any questions, you can just write it on the chat box.
कोई बात नहीं अंकिता, अगर नहीं है सवाल तो कोई बात नहीं, आप ले लीजिएगा, मुझे भेज दीजिएगा, मैं आंसर कर दूंगा। अगर कुछ मन में किसी की कोई सवाल है तो वो पूछ ले एक बार। आप वो बोगनविला की बात कर रहे हैं जी।
The participants can write their questions on the chat box and we'll be having the questionnaire round after the second session. I would now like to invite Professor Dr. Bharti to discuss about the legal aspects of forest and wildlife conservation. Dr. Bharti is presently Professor of Law at National Law University, Delhi, which she had joined in 2009. Prior to that, she was teaching at Faculty of Law, Delhi University since 1998. She has been the faculty coordinator for MOOC's course on environmental law that has had wide subscription across the country. She is also the director, Center of Environmental Law, Policy and Research, NLU Delhi. The international environmental conferences held by NGT is in the past 3 occasions has seen her active participation in the organization and publication of its proceedings. She has chaired thematic sessions, Challenges of Environmental Protection as a part of International Conference on Sustainable Development and World Economy in 2019, held at India International Center, New Delhi. She has been the key speaker at the 2nd and 3rd Indian Law Conclave on the theme of climate change and environmental laws in 2019 and 20 respectively. I again welcome you, ma'am. I would now like to hand over the mic to ma'am. The gathering is yours. Over to
Thank
you,
you
ma'am.
so much. Thank you very much, Anchita, Dr. Anchita, and a very, my grateful thanks to Mr. Dr. R.K. Singhal, Director of IPM Law Academy, Dr. Meenakshi Tomar, the principal, and of course, my greetings to Mr. Rakesh Khatri, who's a renowned environmentalist and founder of the Eco Roots Foundation. I think इतना आपका inspiring talk सुना है sir. I
Thank you,
am
ma'am.
so grateful and I'm
Thank
so
you.
happy
Thank
to
you.
meet you, sir.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
आपकी practical class के बाद में जो मेरी theory की class होगी बहुत ही बेमायने लगती है मुझको.
नहीं 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 बिल्कुल नहीं, मैं आपको सुनने के लिए बैठा हूँ, मैं आपको सुनने के लिए बैठा हूँ, मैं लॉ सीखना चाहता हूँ कुछ, मैं भी मैं कई बार फंस जाता हूँ काम करते करते, मुझे लगता है लॉ बहुत जरूरी है इस काम के लिए.
तो सर मैं कुछ तो आप सभी से मुखातिब हूँ और I would just like to speak a little on my given topic, which is wildlife and forest protection. So essentially human race की जब हम बात करते हैं तो it's been a long journey, and from the dawn of civilization, और अब जो हम अपने आप को civilized कहते हैं after so many centuries, we realize that we have played havoc with nature. जितने भी स्क्रिप्चर्स हैं, जितने भी रिलीजन्स हैं, वो सभी मान्यता देते हैं वेरियस एलिमेंट्स ऑफ नेचर, खास तौर पे जो फॉरेस्ट है, जो वाइल्ड लाइफ है, उसको हम रेवरेंस करते हैं, उसको हम बहुत ही एक रिलीजियसली मानते हैं. लेकिन वी हैव कम टू दैट स्टेट ऑफ अफेयर्स वेयर there is basic exploitation, and it's a situation where we are faced with an existential crisis. Existential in the sense that it's a turning point in the history of mankind presently, and either we sink or we swim. So it's late but not too late, hopefully. जब हम स्पेशली फॉरेस्ट एंड वाइल्ड लाइफ की बात करते हैं तो we nowadays an ecocentric view has come up, which is contrasted to the anthropogenic view. Sorry. Anthropogenic view is where man or human being is at the center and all other living forms are subsumed or are, subsidiary, ancillary, incidental, and the value which is attached to the human concern, and everything is to be utilized for his endeavors, for his welfare, for his or her welfare, and so on. So this anthropogenic kind of scheme of things, which was especially pronounced after the Industrial Revolution and the economic development of various countries, it has reached its zenith. And there is a turning around now in terms of the ecocentric view, which takes up that all elements of nature have to be equally, they have an equal place in the scheme of things in the ecosystem, which is there, on Earth. And this, there is, rights of human beings, जो हम कहते हैं right to environment, that is to be contrasted with rights of nature. So this is a legal concept. This is a legal kind of an idea, and a very important progressive view, because rights of nature हमेशा से traditional viewpoint रहा, लेकिन उसका eclipse हो गया बीच में for thousands, for hundreds of years, and now we are back to square one, where we are, we are really compelled to consider that rights of nature are there. And significantly, Indian High Court ne, Uttarakhand High Court ne, in 2017, it formally gave its judgment, a very famous judgment, in which it recognized Ganga and Yamuna as legal entities, and in which they would be accorded legal rights, and the concept of parens patriae, or the state as a guardian of these of the legal, of these legal entities came forward. The judgment quoted the Stockholm Conference and the Declaration of 1972, and 1972 से international environmental law journey शुरू हुई, जहां पर सारी countries developing and developed, they came together for the first time to consider on the issue of environment. And thereafter, the Rio conference and declaration that took place in 1992, the Johannesburg Summit of 2002, and of course the Paris Agreement, the latest, which is of 2015. So it's been a vast expanse, although short in point of time from the point of view of environment. Environment एक ऐसा concern है जो कि seamless है, borderless है. It envelops all human beings, all societies, all countries. So you cannot put artificial limits to environment. So climate change का अगर कहीं पर उसका, if there is greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted in one part of the world, its impact may be felt right in the opposite part. So US में अगर factories धुआंधार अपनी toxic fumes और उसमें greenhouse gas emissions हो रहे हैं तो उसका impact शायद शंघाई में पड़े, right? So this is the state of affairs where everything is so interconnected on the subject of environment. So the other very important aspect which I wanted to also share with you is the whole idea of common concern of mankind. Now, this is to be contrasted with common heritage of mankind. So common heritage of mankind is something like, which is beyond the national jurisdiction of the entire world as it is segregated among states. So common heritage of mankind is, for instance, outer space, it is Antarctica, it is the high seas. These are the best examples that are given for it. Common concern of mankind is those areas in the global world which may be situated within countries. So they are within national jurisdictions, but they are having that kind of immense importance, wherein they are the common concern of mankind. For instance, the Amazon forests, which are located in Latin America. For instance, the entire Himalayan range, which is there in the Indian subcontinent. So because of its, these are the lungs of the earth. And you know that when forest fires take place here, or there is a lot of deforestation, denudation of the forest cover, it results in immense harm. So species are lost, and it also affects the carbon absorption, which is a dire kind of a situation which is being faced by mankind in view of the increasing global temperatures and climate change. So common concern of mankind, especially in the time of pandemic, as was also mentioned by the director, I think he mentioned in his speech. So it is, so you are forced to reckon the interconnect between the different species of nature. And the pandemic is also considered to be the result of the transgression of human beings in the habitats of, the natural habitats of different life forms. So here, जो खत्री जी ने पूरा अपना एक कमाल का, उनका एक endeavor है, जहाँ पर उन्होंने nest, बनाए, which, the birds, they do not have presently, the trees are lost and, they have no place to go to, and we are losing increasingly the species. So it is a very, very important, initiative at the ground level, by an individual and who has gained such eminence, internationally. Now, when you look at the kind of situation existing internationally, forest के ऊपर एक बड़ा अजीब सा scenario है. We do not have a forest convention internationally, right? Internationally, कोई भी ऐसा treaty या convention नहीं है. And फिलहाल, of course, और treaties है, bilateral, regional, etc. But एक international level पे ऐसे कोई treaty नहीं है. एक शुरुआत, एक beginning was made in the year, when the Rio conference was held. Then non-binding, authoritative statement by way of forest principles was elaborated. And they related, of course, to the conservation, preservation of forests across the world, and the need to make it, to integrate them with the whole idea of sustainable development. So that was 1992 में forest principles जो शुरुआत हुई. इसके अलावा you find that recently, because जो भी developments हो रहे हैं उनको हम recent उससे भी थोड़ा तालमेल करना जरूरी है. और इस context में जो ग्लासगो में Conference of Parties हुई in COP26 जो अभी नवंबर 2021 में हुई, उसमें एक declaration किया गया है on forest and land use, and this has been endorsed by 141 countries. It emphasizes a need for the transformative steps to move the world onto a sustainable and resilient land use path, right? And to reverse forest loss and land degradation by the year 2030. So again, what we find is that there is a kind of, there's a declaration, और आप समझ रहे हैं, international law context में, there are different sources of law. The most powerful is the convention or the treaty. After that is customs. Then you have, judicial decisions. And then you have soft law instruments. So declaration, principles, these are all soft law instruments. Soft law instruments, of course, it's not that they are without meaning, but they have a lot of persuasive value. पर उनका एक compulsion नहीं होता, उनका एक mandate नहीं होता, right? So you find also that there is a very important initiative which is called REDD+, REDD+, right? It is a United Nations REDD+. It is really looking at reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, right? Reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. Here, United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, जिसको बोलते हैं, for Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, and UNDP, these three have partnered. And essentially, developing countries it will extend. Can I look at the questions a bit later, right? So if I can finish with the substance right now. So essentially, this REDD initiative is basically where the developing countries would be extended finance and other kinds of technical help for the purposes of conservation and preservation of the forest life, of the forest cover. For instance, it has extended, the REDD initiative has extended to Vietnam, the finance for designing organic farming model for shrimp farming to help to protect its fragile mangrove forests, right? So you have different countries of the world where, this very important initiative is coming forward. You find जो ग्लासगो का फॉरेस्ट स्टेटमेंट है उसमें इंडिया ने भाग नहीं लिया, right? So that is a matter of a little concern, and that is primarily because in view of the developmental kind of situation which is being faced by India, that we are in a hurry to because there are so many issues that remain yet to be resolved, especially for issues of poverty, unemployment. And so we need to develop better and more in order to provide for the vast masses. And infrastructural development is a very important component. And if you're looking at forests, so we are trying to, increase the forest cover. And here also there is a very interesting kind of reading that has come up recently, but yet we remain a little hesitant, in terms of joining formally these such kinds of declaration. In fact, जब ये forest principles आए थे रियो के 1992 में, so there was a lot of debate whether it should be converted into a treaty, right? Even at that juncture. So there were countries that opposed it and that advocated it. India, Malaysia, these are the countries that opposed this kind of a convention on forests. And there were other countries, Canada, Finland especially, which promoted or advocated that there should be a forest convention. तो essentially जो भी countries का response होता है to international developments, it is basically the trigger or the stimulus is in its own domestic compulsions, right? What kind of uh, how you want to pursue development and so on. Now, India में जो total forest cover है, जो recent report आई है, उसमें ये बताया गया that the total forest cover of India has increased by 1,540 square kilometers between 2019 and 2020, which means it had increased from 21.67% of the total geographical area in 2019 to 21.71%. So 0.04% का इजाफा हुआ, right, in 2020. So we are aiming to have 1/3 of the country, the total geographical area, to be covered by forests. That is what 1988 की जो National Forest Policy थी that proclaimed. But this kind of growth in India's forest cover, it is slightly deceptive because it is understood that it is mainly due to an increase in area which is really dominated by commercial plantations. So commercial plantations को भी हम forest उसमें हम include करते हैं, and that is slightly not the right way, because उसमें we do understand that उस तरह की dense growth नहीं होती है. It is an artificial kind of situation that we are talking about. In fact, the moderately dense forest has declined in India. When you say ये अलग-अलग तरह की definitions हैं, moderately dense forest, जिसकी canopy density is 70% or above, and the moderately dense forest जो होता है, उसकी 70% or above होता है, and less than moderately dense forest की canopy density is between 40 to 70%, as in terms of figures. So, in fact, 11 states have rather lost the forest cover over this period of time. So, statistics have to be interpreted in a very careful manner, because sometimes if it is not the right meaning affixed to that particular figure that you're talking about, then we can be under a gross kind of a miscalculation. And as was evident in this case of total forest cover, that it has increased, but it is due to entirely different reasons. Now, you find when you're talking about the forest laws in India, and I'll just give you a brief synopsis. Indian Forest Act of 1927 is the basic law, right? And we know this is the pre-British time statutory enactment. And it was basically very, very revenue oriented. It was set in the in the colonial times, and the idea was to basically utilize the vast, immense forest wealth of the country, for the revenue purposes. So essentially, there was a 3/4 distribution or carving out of forests: the reserve forest category, the protected forest, and the village forest. Now, village forest is kind of a very meaningless category because they were not really formed. We look at reserve forest category and protected forest, where reserve forest may the state had its vast monopoly powers. And one important outcome of this Indian Forest Act was to alienate the vast tribal population from their homes, that were there was an intricate linkage between the tribal communities and the forests since times immemorial. It's their homes, it is their lives, their livelihoods, their entire it is totally interconnected there. And here the Indian Forest Act attempted to sever this very important linkage, and it spelled doom for the forest and wildlife of the country, because tribal communities have played their very positive role, you know, affirmative role in protecting wildlife and forests. And now they had to put forward their claims. And those claims would be looked into by the forest settlement officer, and it would be either approved or disapproved, right? So it was a situation which was calamitous. It was extremely, it spelled a lot of problems for the future of Indian forests and wildlife. So this Indian Forest Act, it continues till today. We have not replaced it, or we have not made too many amendments to it. Of course, there is an amendment bill that has come up recently, but it is not so much to uh, to strengthen the law, but there are certain provisions which are rather going to be, you know, a little diluting of its already the kind of pronounced problems that were there, you know, that serving the revenue interests, that could be made even, you know, it could be heightened. So you find the Indian Forest Act of 1927 is the important legislation. Then you had the National Forest Policy of 1952. So it continued to view the forests as a very important source of wealth, you know, source of raw material and so on for the country, for its industries. And now, of course, the change would be that instead of serving its masters, the colonial masters, it would be the state, the people of India, that it would be helpful, you know. So the conservation, the management of forests, the environmental aspect of the forest was still not highlighted. It was basically viewed as a source of a natural resource. It was only later the Forest Conservation Act of 1980 came up, wherein it's a very brief act, and in that it was outlined that it prohibits the state governments from denoting, de-reserving at a reserve forest, denotifying or de-reserving a reserve forest, and diverting a forest land to non-forest purposes without the prior permission of the central government. There was also further the National Forest Policy of 1988, which aimed to have certain objectives in view. Can you just give me a second? There is a little problem. Just a minute. Yeah, I'm so sorry. So essentially, you find that there have been these, various pronouncements at different points of time, and the next important change that came up was through the 1988, the National Forest Policy of 1988, in which there were, am I audible, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, audible.
Just a minute. I think I've minimized the screen for some reason. It has suddenly become very small for me. Okay. So essentially, the Forest Conservation Act was followed by the National Forest Policy of 1988, where for the first time you find there is a change in the mindset and in the outlook of the policy maker, in which it was said that 1/3 of the total geographical area must be retained by the forest cover. The second important aspect was that the tribal communities, the scheduled tribes and the other forest dwellers, they were recognized rather for the first time that they are an integral part of the entire forest, life, and they need to be recognized, as well as their efforts have to be galvanized they have to be, it has to be ensured that they contribute their might towards the, the protection of the vast, the environment and the wealth of the forest. And here the joint forestry movement, the joint forestry mechanism was initiated also, in which the forest department and the tribal community especially, they were expected to work together, for the purpose of, with the focus on conservation efforts. So apart from this, you find that there is the Forest Rights Act of 2006, which came up as to correct the historical inequity, the historical injustice that was meted out to the the tribals in the past. And the Gram Sabha became the basic unit, which was to extend its consent. So it became very important for many purposes, one of which was to record the rights which are available under this Forest Rights Act to individuals and communities, and further that its consent would be imperative for any kind of, say, developmental project that might be undertaken in that region. And you are well aware of the Niyamgiri Hills case. So the Niyamgiri Hills case was where the bauxite mining was being indulged in those Niyamgiri Hills, and the Supreme Court did a remarkable contribution. It has always played an immense role, and in this particular case, it kind of stepped backwards, and it let the communities and the Gram Sabha of that region speak on behalf of the the people who were to be affected by the bauxite mining, whether to go ahead with that project or not. And there was a consensus to not go ahead with that project. So that was one of the very important achievements, of the 2013-14, this judgment came up. And however, there were efforts thereafter, because it was understood that the developmental efforts of the state, there might be an impediment, in that situation, by the kind of very progressive, proactive, the Forest Rights Act. And so there was, some kind of efforts were also there to further, especially for infrastructural projects, that the consent of the Gram Sabha might not be mandated. So this kind of situation remained. You find that So another point is meaning of the term forest. So here, the meaning of the term forest has been, in the Godvarman case. Now you would be, I think, aware of the Godvarman case as another important judgment, rather a series of judgments that has come up in the context of forest governance. And T.N. Godvarman had put in a writ petition before the Supreme Court. This was essentially for stopping the illegal cutting of trees in the Nilgiri Hills, and it was this writ petition attracted many other individuals and associations, organizations to file before the Supreme Court on similar issues of illegal timber that was being logged, it was being transported across the country, especially from the northeastern states. And this again, the Supreme Court then joined all these petitions and heard them across almost 2 decades. So it's one of the, and it brought in a very interesting principle of continuing mandamus, right? So look, I am leaving here and I'm going to rejoin because somewhat my screen has become totally minimized and I'm not knowing how to इसको बड़ा नहीं हो पा रहा है. Just give me just half a minute, okay? I'm just connecting back to you. Just give me half a minute.
Sure, ma'am. Participants, meanwhile, you can write your questions on the chat box.
Yeah, sorry. So essentially, this is how we really this whole issue of forest governance came to the fore. Um, this is a very brief introduction, and now we go to the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Wildlife Protection Act, one thing which has to be kept in mind is that international events have played a very major role in the Indian context. So forest issues pe thoda sa hum log we have held back, because of our the whole strategy to have economic development at a faster pace. But usually the international events, the conferences and so on, have played a trigger to bring changes in our legal frameworks. So the Stockholm Conference of 1972 was the first such event, and it also brought in immediate change. And the first, the first really legal statute in relation to environment on the subject of wildlife came up in 1972. Now, in this, there are several things which are very noteworthy, and which is, firstly, there is wildlife itself is, it not only covers animals, wildlife animals, wild animals, but also plants, as well as the ecosystem. Right. So ecosystem is it's a very important component, which means the habitat, the kind of where these wild animals and plants are located. And there are certain schedules. There are 6 schedules in which there are the subject matter of wildlife is classified. Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 Part 2 is the most important. It receives the highest degree of protection. And then you have Schedule 3, which Schedule 3 and 4. Schedule 3 is again about plants, and 4 is about further animals. Sorry, 3 and 4 is again about various wild animals. 5 is about the vermin. Vermin is a kind of and there's a lot of debate about vermin. And 6 is about plants. So we have this kind of schedules which give the degree of protection, as the highest one, Schedule 1 and 2 has the highest, and then it comes down. Then you have hunting of animals has been prohibited, by the latest, not by the latest, but in 1991, the amendment came about. And hunting was, of course, the prerogative. It was a fine form of entertainment and for the royalty and for the games person and for the sports person and whatnot. So it was considered to be a very important step forward, wherein the hunting was prohibited, but except for certain situations which are enumerated very carefully in the enactment, right? So for instance, if the animal is dangerous or is infected, is diseased, or in terms of self-defense, right? But there also you need a written permission. Self-defense, of course, you cannot have a written permission, but for all others, you would need a written permission of the chief wildlife warden. The chief wildlife warden is a very important persona, in the whole scheme of things. There's a whole structure of authorities, boards, and there are functions, composition of these boards are very interesting to note. But so what you understand is that hunting is prohibited completely, but of course, subject to certain exemptions. Even for scientific research, etc., for making of snake venom, for instance, that is an exception which is there under the under the provision of the Act. There is a very another significant aspect is the establishment of protected areas. This establishment of protected areas is through national parks and through wildlife sanctuaries, and community reserves, and you have conservation reserves. So these are different ways in which you try to locate the important the wildlife different the animals and birds and various species, so that they are the endangered species, especially so that they are immunized, from the outward world. Now here there is a concept of critical wildlife habitat, core wildlife habitat, and this kind of phrase especially comes in with respect to tiger reserves. So and there's a lot of controversy on this issue. So here the critical wildlife habitats are really those spaces. They are the interiormost. They are those they are inviolate spaces where the human presence is considered to be it is not considered to be conducive to the wildlife that is present there. So usually we have a healthy interaction between, say, tribals and the wildlife, and that has been especially this change has come up through after 1988. But you find that there's been a hesitancy of accommodating, say, the tribals and the scheduled tribes and the forest dwellers in these very sacred spaces, such exclusive spaces rather, where the mere human presence might not be at all the right way to proceed. So there's a full method by which you could exclude human presence. So it's not just to give a notification and that's the end of it. And there is a follow-up to the Forest Rights Act of 2006. There are provisions there also. So there is a linkage between the Wildlife Protection Act and the Forest Rights Act of 2006, and you have to read them together in order to understand better on this issue. So what does it say really? That whenever there is a need to exclude human beings from critical wildlife habitats, those core space areas, then there is the need to have informed consent of the Gram Sabha, and there would be experts also. There would be a whole committee which would look into this issue. There would be a rehabilitation package. So resettlement of the people who might be in that area located, they have to be resettled, and there has to be a resettlement and a rehabilitation package. And this has to be approved, by the Gram Sabha. And only then you can take this formal step, of removing the people from this critical wildlife habitats. So why is there this controversy? Because according to many conservationists and environmentalists, it is not the right way to proceed. It is rather you should allow, because tribals have been so intrinsically, cohabiting spaces in the forests along with the wildlife that they would, their presence would actually ensure that whatever you're trying to protect, the wildlife species, it remains protected and is not made the subject of poaching or doesn't have any other, I mean, there's no other problem faced by it. So this is one issue. Now, when you're looking at another aspect of the Wildlife Protection Act is regulation of trade and commerce. Now, here it may be mentioned that India is a party to CITES, which is a convention on international trade, with respect to endangered species, fauna and flora. So this came up in 1973 and it was enforced in 1975. So this is basically the international treaty governing wildlife trade internationally. There is no other, treaty as such. And here it has protected, and India is a party to it. So it has protected a lot of 37,000 species of plants and animals. It has various appendix, and so the endangered species, the most endangered ones, they are featured in the first appendix. Then gradually, in terms of lesser protection required, you have the second and third appendix. And this is a legally binding instrument. Right now, 184 states are party to it. And there is so essentially in Appendix 1, whatever the species that are featured, the trade is generally prohibited. For the rest of the other two appendix, there is a regulation of trade, right? And international trade is possible if it fulfills three conditions of legality, sustainability, and traceability. So these are the three conditions which are mentioned in CITES. And CITES is a very important instrument which actually helps to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals also. It reflects all the three dimensions. Sustainable development, there are three dimensions which are of social, economic, and the ecological, which means people, planet, and prosperity. And it does through partnership of various countries. So CITES, India is a party, and India also has, several. It has adopted a kind of that symmetry in its own act, and you find, of course, through various. There can be entries which can be removed, which new entries can be adopted, right, for CITES as well as the Wildlife Protection Act in the schedules that I'm talking about. So it's the central government that does it. And regulation of trade and commerce. So there is Schedule 1, as I said, and Schedule 2, Part 2, which is a highly protected. So there you cannot have trade and commerce. And for other species relating to Schedule 3 and 4, you can have trade and commerce subject to license, subject to certain requirements, conditions, and so on. Now, we are aware that the trade in ivory is totally prohibited, ivory or any kind of ivory items. Elephant ivory, the trade was banned by the CITES itself in 1989. And India has also adopted, that the way it has proceeded. And there was a very famous case, the Delhi High Court case. It was ivory traders case in 1997, perhaps, where it was argued that mammoth ivory. So there's a whole, sub-theme of mammoth ivory, which is of elephants, which roamed the planet 4,000 years back. And then they got buried in the permafrost of Siberia. And so now the permafrost is thawing because of global, warming. And the tusks, their tusks they have remained intact in that vast, that snow, that whole, and the way it was. And this mammoth ivory is considered, it was argued that this is not elephant ivory. It means that because the basic worry was that elephants were being poached for the ivory, and they were being killed, and there were horrendous ways in which it was taking place. So this was argued that mammoth ivory is not being taken from an elephant as such, live elephant, so it should be excluded from the purview of the ban. But the Indian, the High Court, the Delhi High Court, and later the Supreme Court also, in 2003 judgment, Supreme Court has reaffirmed that you cannot have this kind of exclusion, elephant ivory or mammoth ivory. Both are excluded because it's very difficult to distinguish mammoth ivory, and in the garb of mammoth ivory, it could be even the elephant ivory that is being traded. So just to make sure that this does not feature at all, within the Indian, for the purposes of trade in the Indian system, so it is being totally excluded. Then you have Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, and it provides for the establishment of a centralized wildlife crime data bank also, and it's been awarded the Wildlife Enforcement Award. It has got by UNEP for its role in combating trans-border environmental crime. So environmental crime is, of course, a new, concept that you might have be reading about it in recent times. So you read NCRB, so National Crime Bureau, NCRB, so National Crime Research Bureau, right? So there are statistics that come up in terms of various kinds of crimes. There are various headings of crime. So nowadays, crimes in relation to environment are also being featured in the NCRB statistics, and it would be interesting, and I would suggest to you to look through them. So what is interesting to note is that forest and wildlife crimes, they are the majority segment of crimes, under the headings. In fact, 88% of the environmental crimes, they relate to forest and wildlife crimes. And a very small segment relate to crimes relating to Environment Protection Act or Water Act or Air Act. There are penal provisions in all these acts, you are aware. So to what extent they are really, effective, that really calls for research. And what I find about a little disappointing is that all of us, we as individuals, as part of families, part of social groupings, part of nation, part of the global world, I think most of us are aware of the problems that are faced, in terms of environmental crisis, whether it's climate change, whether it's biodiversity decline, whether it is water pollution, air pollution. So there are, waste, and so on. But there is, the kind of research, scholarship, the kind of activism, as Mr. Khatri is doing, or, that is kind of not so much there, especially in the academics, So, I would really, it would be so much wonderful, if few amongst you come forward and they take up, various topics. There's so much to do. Environmental crimes is such an upcoming area, and there is a need to have a greater depth, more empirical researches, and so much can be, because it's only based on empirical research that you can have policy formulations, more effective policy formulations, and that response would be then, the law and policy response would be connected to the ground reality. So anyhow, so essentially, now I'd like to talk about just two more things as a time. Yeah, we have, I guess, another 10 minutes or so. So I'll just talk to you about two interesting sub themes, which I thought, could be considered as part of this, interaction. So there is this word vermin that I had talked to you earlier. Now there is a new bill that has come up to amend the Wildlife Protection Act, and this bill has been featured. It's been circulated in December of 2021, very, very recent. So. So in that, the vermin, which I've mentioned, it features as part of, it is part of Schedule 5 perhaps, where anything which is a vermin can be culled. It can be killed, right? So it is basically a rodent, जैसे pest होता है, mouse है, something like that. So once it features there, and it's considered to be a problem for the crops, it is considered a problem for property, for lives, and so on. So it can be easily culled. And there is another section 62, which talks about that except for Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, Part 2, this has been the most important categories of protection. So the central government can declare any wildlife species to be a vermin, right? And a vermin is for a particular area and it is for a particular duration. For that duration and for that area, then vermin means that you are open, that species is open to be killed. It's like a kill list. It's like an easy game for the hunters, for the traders, and so on. Now, what is important to note is that in this new bill, the protection of Schedule 2, Part 2 has been removed. Okay, so it's only one part of the protection remains. One important limb has been removed. Now, what happens? For instance, Nilgai. You might have heard again reports of Nilgai. कि इतने सारे numbers हो गए. Wild boar, these in Uttarakhand and Bihar. Monkey, in Himachal Pradesh. Then you have these were declared to be vermin, by the notification of 2015, in accordance with the request of the states. So it was declared by the central government. Now, this could create problems because there are other states which are coming up with strange requests. For instance, Maharashtra, Goa, it has submitted a request for peacock to be declared as a vermin. Numbers itne zyada ho gaye. Bengal has talked of elephants. So it's like the problem is that we do not have population estimates. So when you're talking about a vermin, you're talking about essentially increase in numbers of that particular species. It has, so that endangerment or that threat that was espied at any point of time, that is removed. Because it has gained so much of traction, it has gained so much of increase in numbers. And so it can be, easily, it can be handled through killings. Now, so the basic problem is we are not even sure what is the population estimate of that particular species to be declared as vermin. Why it is being considered as a problem is because it is being seen more often. It is spotted more often in the fields, it is being spotted, around villages. Now that could be also because its natural habitat is being lost, right? So it is not so much to do with numbers really, but it is more to do with the kind of the human, the wildlife conflict, the habitat kind of stresses which are being felt today. And even if it is a question of numbers, then you have to look at the population dynamics. You have to look at the mitigative strategies rather than looking at outright killing. And I think there have been enough cases. There was a reported case in Kerala of a pregnant cow which bit some fruit, a pineapple or something, in which an explosive was kept. And it was meant for a wild boar, which was declared as a vermin at that area. So the question arises that how can you have such a barbaric, even if you are intending, to be intending that particular fruit for a vermin, how can you allow such a brutal kind of a way to end the life of any life form, right? And of course, you cannot take those kind of precautions that a non-vermin, comes across it. So there are cases of electrocution, setting of live wires. So it's a huge problem area that needs to be considered. Okay, the next important issue, which again I'd like to speak about, is about invasive species. Now, I think invasive species is something which you again must have Yeah. So this new bill, so in the Wildlife Protection Act, there is no mention of invasive species, and the new bill, it definitely talks about uh, invasive alien species. So, so in order to regulate its import, trade, possession, proliferation of invasive alien species. Now, when you're talking about invasive alien species, what you would understand is that these are species which are not part of the natural ecosystem of that particular area, right? And they are imported through various measures from another ecosystem. It may be through gifting, it may be through simply sticking to the ship of a particular, it's moving through the waters, it harbors, it ports, and then, that particular life form, it is introduced and so on. So it is, so what is happening is that it disturbs, when such a new species is introduced in an ecosystem, a different ecosystem, it disturbs the equilibrium which is attained by that natural ecosystem over thousands of years of evolution, right? And it may happen that it adapts very quickly to the new system, is able to multiply quickly, and in fact outnumbers the native counterparts for resources as food and space, and also because there are no predators, for it in that region. And in fact, it may itself predate on the native species, who invariably they cannot mount a defense um, against something they have never encountered before. So just to give you an example, it's a very interesting theme. So Asian toad, which was indigenous to India and the Southeast Asian countries, few individuals accidentally landed it around 2010 in a port in East Madagascar, along with the shipments of mining equipment. And it was Thailand was the natural ecosystem from which it was brought to Eastern Madagascar. And this non-native amphibian, it quickly naturalized, and in fact, it became it started procreating, it started establishing itself, and it occupied more than 100 square kilometers of land. And by 2018, the toad population had swelled into several millions. This alien species is causing merciless, there's been a lot of devastation which is being faced by the native wildlife population in that region, right? So this toad has a defense mechanism by which the moment a predator tries to devour it, it releases toxins, and that toxins, that poison, it immediately affects the predator, and the predator is in fact, killed in the process. So in the natural surroundings, you would find that where it was in Thailand, that is, for instance, that it was there was a resistance to its, the toxic mechanism that it had to the predators that were, in that region. And so they had learned to cope with that, the defense mechanism of the toad. But here, the predators are at a complete loss, and they are overpowered, by this situation. So even in the Indian context, you find that there are several plant varieties, there are several animal varieties which are invasive in their, in their operation. So you have the water hyacinth, which is native to South America's Amazon basin. It is regarded as the most successful colonizer in the plant kingdom. And it arrived as an ornamental plant which was gifted to India in the 18th century by Lady Hastings. She was the wife of the first Governor General, Warren Hastings. And today you find that this water hyacinth, it occupies, it covers literally all water bodies. So, and it has it to such an extent that it does not allow oxygen and sunlight to permeate into the layers, the depths of the water bodies, and which does not allow aquatic life to thrive. So you find that apart from human beings, nature also has its role to play, but this is all man-made, right? So they were not, these alien species have not just come from, they've not come on their own. It has been, man has been the agency that has introduced, these life, the alien lives, the alien animal or plant species, and it has had its impact on biodiversity and so on. So I guess we'll end the conversation here, because there's a lot which can be talked about, and it's like environment is a subject which there's so much to speak, there's so much to relate to, but so in the end, I would just say that yes, please, all of you, take your inspiration from Mr. Khatri and so many eminent examples, around us. And IPM is doing a great service, in bringing forward, the voices, that the same voices, and it's like so it's very important to bring this awareness and also to emulate it, to the extent that is possible, so that all of us individually can contribute our might to the environment. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bharti, for the kind words. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am, for wonderfully explaining the concepts of environmental crimes and wildlife conflicts, etc. I hope that it must have really extended the horizon for the research scholars, and they will definitely consider these topics for their further research. I now request all the participants to kindly turn on their cameras so that we can have a virtual photo session. I repeat, kindly switch on your camera so that we can have the screenshot. I request all the participants to kindly switch on their cameras. Thank you so much, everyone. Now,
Thank you.
We'll be moving towards the questionnaire round. So many participants have asked, sir, how they can join you for this great vision of yours, and how they can work for the improvement of environment. Moreover, there is a question for Professor Dr. Bharti.
मुझे तो अंकिता जी जब भी ज्वाइन करना चाहें बस गूगल पे जाके टाइप करें, अपनी ईमेल भेज दें, हमारे साथ वॉलंटियर करें, हमारे साथ इंटर्नशिप करना चाहें इंटर्नशिप करें, अपने एरिया में कुछ डेवलप करना चाहते हैं तो उसके लिए वी आर रेडी। तो हमारे संग ऐसी कोई समस्या नहीं है, आप जस्ट एक मेल करें, हम लोग आपके बहुत नजदीक हैं, शुरू करेंगे काम। और डेफिनेटली जो काम मैंने शुरू करा और मेरे साथ इतने लोगों ने शुरू करा उसमें आप भी जुड़ेंगे तो मेरी वर्कफोर्स बढ़ती है, और मेरी वर्कफोर्स बढ़ती है तो नेचर के लिए हम लोग काम कर पाएंगे। यू आर ऑल आर वेलकम टू वर्क विद मी।
Sir, there's another question. Someone is asking whether the NGO attend to other species of birds apart from sparrows as well.
आपका मुझे क्लियर नहीं आ रहा है वॉइस, थोड़ा सा मेरे यहाँ डिस्टर्बेंस है शायद कुछ थोड़ी सी। जी
Sir, the
एक
participant Harya Khan is asking whether the NGO attend to other species of the birds apart from sparrows.
जी जी
Sir, I guess
बिल्कुल,
there's
स्पैरोज के अलावा बहुत सारी स्पीशीज के लिए काम करते हैं। हेलो, आपको आवाज आ रही है मेरी?
yes, sir, you're audible now. हाँ जी sir.
हाँ, हम लोग पर्टिकुलर स्पैरो ही नहीं और बहुत सारे बर्ड के लिए काम करते हैं। हम लोग जमैना हो गया, बुलबुल हो गई, कोयल हो गई, उन लोगों के लिए भी नेस्ट तैयार करते हैं, उनके लिए भी नेस्ट लगाते हैं। वरना आउल के भी नेस्ट लगाते हैं हम लोग, तो पुरानी लकड़ी से लगाते हैं भारी वाली। तो इस तरीके के काम हम करते ही रहते हैं। तो ऐसा नहीं है कि पर्टिकुलर स्पैरो के लिए काम कर रहे हैं। आप अगर और भी किसी चिड़िया के लिए या और भी किसी बर्ड के लिए काम करना चाहते हैं, या आपको इंजर्ड मिलता है, या आपको लगता है कि वो प्रॉब्लम में है, तो भी यू कैन कॉल अस। हमारे पास वॉलंटियर्स हैं जो अपने अलग अलग एरिया में इस तरीके के काम करते हैं, हम उनको अच्छे तरीके से उठाते हैं। पर मैं आपसे यही कहूंगा, क्योंकि अभी बसंत पंचमी होके गई है और अभी इनका ब्रीडिंग सीजन शुरू हो गया है, तो एक प्रैक्टिस तो आज के बाद आप जरूर शुरू करिएगा अपने छतों के ऊपर, अपने पार्क्स के अंदर कुछ क्विज, पुराने धागे, आपके घर में ऊन हो, पुराना ऊन, रुई हो, या इस तरीके की चीजें जो उनके नेक्स्ट में यूज होती हैं, वो आप एक जगह डाल दे, वो वहां से ले जाएंगे उठा के और अपने नेक्स्ट के अंदर यूज करेंगे। तो मुझे लगता है वो एक अच्छा सपोर्ट सिस्टम उनको
Thank you, sir.
मिल जाएगा
और
थोड़ा सा, और कुछ नहीं। बाकी आप
हमारे
किसी भी
पास
बर्ड के लिए भी आप
उनके साथ साथ सर यूट्यूब पर भी we had participants connected with us. तो at both the platforms, people are asking whether like if you can provide your email address or something, they would like to be connected with you.
बिल्कुल, मेरी ईमेल बहुत सिंपल है, ecorootsfoundation@gmail.com, naturetune@gmail.com। आप गूगल पे जाके सिर्फ सर्च करें, नेक्स्ट मैन ऑफ इंडिया लिख दें, राकेश खत्री लिख दें, आपको पूरी कॉन्टेक्ट डिटेल मिल जाएंगी उसमें, और हमारे ऑफिस से आपको बहुत जल्दी जवाब दे दिया जाएगा।
Thank you so much, sir.
थैंक यू, थैंक यू, थैंक यू।
We have questions for Professor Dr. Bharti ma'am as well. Ma'am, a participant Hadia Khan is asking, has there been any mechanism in place to make countries with the highest carbon emission or footprint towards poor countries or underdeveloped nations?
Can you just repeat the question? What is there some mechanism you said?
The question is, has there been any mechanism in place to make countries with the highest carbon emissions or footprints towards poor countries or underdeveloped nations? Like she's
Okay.
asking, what is the
Right.
mechanism?
So essentially not directly, but if you know it, if you've been reading about it, then UNFCCC is 1992 is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and thereafter the Kyoto Protocol came up in 1997, in which the developed countries had certain binding targets, emission targets that they had to fulfill. And these only developed countries, they had the mandate, and there were three market mechanisms that were also envisaged under Kyoto Protocol, in which clean development mechanisms is one such way. One of the three market mechanisms is a clean development mechanism, where developed countries could invest in developing countries, and they could so both countries could benefit, because the developed country would fulfill the emission target, and the developing country would also get the benefit of transfer technology and the investment, foreign investment, for itself. So there is no compulsion in any way, for this process. It is entirely up to the prerogative how the developed country wishes to proceed. It can also, there can be joint ventures between developed countries themselves, and it can also be between developed and a developing country. There is a green climate fund also that has been, now it is there, and $100 billion, it's supposed to attract such kind of subscription from the developed countries, again, which is to be used for the purpose of mitigation and adaptation strategies for the developing countries. So there are financial mechanisms, there are enabling mechanisms, for the purpose of help extended by the developed to the developing countries. But there is nothing, it's all very, very voluntary. So, the Green Climate Fund, it has only, say, for instance, out of $100 billion, it has only fulfilled 10%. And it doesn't have that kind of subscription which is coming forward. So there is a historical injustice which has come up, and this North-South dialogue is very rampant, that uh, uh, the developed countries, they have gone ahead in terms of economic development. They had the resources. They were colonialist, imperialists, and they took the help of natural resources, which was based in developing world, and they could, progress much faster. And the developing world was struggling, once they became independent, they had to basically fulfill their basic, fundamental needs of food, clothing, shelter, and they could not really look at the cause of environment. So there is this very a polarized kind of a situation between developing and the developed world, where each tries that. Now the developed world says, and we have the Paris Agreement, in that context, which is further to the Kyoto Protocol, because in Kyoto there was only the developed countries who had to complete their targets. But now it is the nationally developed contributions, NDCs of all countries, that would matter. So yeah, I guess that's in short what could be said here, but we could have a class on this, separately. It is a very huge topic indeed.
Thank you, ma'am. So there's another question for you. Dr. Umar Nazir Bhatt is asking, have we reached a decentralization stage where we need a NGT-like special tribunals at state and district levels for timely and effective grassroots implementation of environmental laws?
Yeah, so that's a very important perception, because NGT, it has come up in 2010, the statute, and it has exclusive civil jurisdiction. So which means that it's basically the NGT and its various benches in the 4 regions of the country. So there are the 5 core areas, where all environmental disputes can be brought forward. But then, is it enough for a country as vast and as diverse as India? And certainly there is merit to the fact that earlier, district courts had civil jurisdiction, and they were much more approachable. They were much more accessible. So you cannot expect say a person who is whose life is disrupted, or environmentally there is a problem in one corner of Northeast, and he has to make an appearance. He has to come to the Kolkata bench, right? So it is a very it's rather a travesty of justice. So it is certainly, that kind of the spread of NGT, and it is the principal bench and the zonal benches that are presently only looking at the issue. So certainly there is merit, in looking at a relook of the jurisdiction of courts.
Thank you, ma'am. And the last question, one of our participants from YouTube is asking that discussions about an Indian, recently there were discussions about an Indian Environment Service. What are your views regarding its role and how it can complement the already existing Indian Forest Service?
Okay. Yeah, so these are, of course, various ways and methods to strengthen, to bring about a kind of greater interest, especially amongst the youth, because youth is certainly going to be the driver of change. And when you're looking at intergenerational issues, because environment, it does not, the question, the problems don't end at any point of time. They are an ongoing process. And whatever we are doing today, it is going to be the brunt is going to be borne by the future generations. So the youth is certainly, it has to play a much more active role. And the Indian Environmental Service could certainly be one way to invigorate, to bring about that kind of dynamism, where the UPSC is always a puller of the best of talents. So it could be expected that once the students, I mean the youth, they occupy various positions, in different parts of the country, in different official the ministries, etc. Then there could be a greater, say a greater uh, this whole dynamism to policy making, to law formation. It could be in a better way expected.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, there is a question for you. What is your moral and valuable message to the upcoming generation that each one must follow to protect our ecosystem? This, sir, is sir connected with us? I guess have some connectivity issues again. All right. I request all the participants to kindly fill the feedback form. I request all the participants to fill the correct details in the feedback forms, as the certificates will be generated via that form only.
Anchita, can I take leave now?
Sure, ma'am. But we are just about to end the session. I would like to invite Dr. Neelam Singh, HOD IPM Law Academy, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, one and all present here. Our Honorable Speaker, Mr. Rakesh Khatri, Dr. Bharti, and all the participants. It is such an honor for me to get the opportunity to thank you all. First of all, I would like to thank our Almighty God for showering their blessings to make this event successful. I would like to thank Mr. Rakesh Khatri, sir, on the behalf of the IPM Law Academy. Sir, thank you so much that you accept our invitation in such a short notice and spare their time from their busy schedule. I express my gratitude to our the second speaker, Dr. Bharti. Dr. Bharti has given a brief knowledge or enlightened us about the wildlife and the animal protection. A special thanks to our director, Dr. R.K. Singh, sir, for providing immense support to make the webinar successful. I must thank the organizing team, the volunteers, for working hard from the past few days to make this webinar successful. I would like to thank our participants from all over India for their active participation. Thank you everyone once again for making a great success to this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much to everyone, to all the students, participants here, and to the IPM faculty. Thanks a lot.
all for coming. We are winding up the session now. We will be organizing 2 more webinars on environmental theme as well, and we'll be having the International E-Conference in October 2022. I hope to see you all there. Thank you.